The smoke reached him before the screaming did. Marcus Webb had been driving home from his daughter's school play, still wearing the ridiculous paper crown she had placed on his head during intermission, when he saw the orange glow tearing through the sky 2 blocks ahead. His hands gripped the wheel. His foot pressed harder on the gas. He didn't think. He didn't calculate risk or weigh consequences. Something deeper than logic, something worn into the bones of a man who had already lost everything once, pulled him forward. He didn't know that night would change 2 lives forever. He didn't know that the woman screaming inside that burning building was already out of chances, out of time, and out of people who cared whether she made it out at all. If this story already has you feeling something, please take a second right now to hit that like button, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel Kindness, because this is a place for people who still believe in second chances and the quiet power of a stranger's courage. Now, let's go back to Marcus. Marcus was 43 years old, and he looked every single year of it. There were creases around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago, before the accident that took his wife, before the hospital bills, before the nights he sat at the kitchen table after his daughter Lily fell asleep, staring at a cup of cold coffee and wondering how a man is supposed to keep going when the gravity of grief makes every single morning feel like climbing a mountain with no shoes. He worked double shifts at a warehouse 3 days a week. He packed Lily's lunches with little hand-drawn notes tucked inside because he remembered his wife used to do it, and he wasn't willing to let that tradition die with her. He coached Lily's weekend soccer team not because he knew anything about soccer, but because the other kids needed a father figure on that field, and he knew what it felt like to need someone who simply showed up. Marcus Webb was exhausted in the way that only single parents understand. Not just tired in the body, but tired somewhere behind the eyes, in a place sleep can't reach. But exhaustion has never once stopped a good man from running toward a fire. He pulled the car to the curb, yanked the door open, and ran. The building was a small event hall, the kind that rents out for weddings and birthday parties and retirement celebrations, and it was burning from the inside out, the windows already glowing amber, the front door hanging open with black smoke pouring out of it like a river moving the wrong direction. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, faces pale and frozen, everyone watching and no one moving. Marcus heard the sirens in the distance, too far. He heard the screaming, too close to ignore. He pulled his jacket over his face and went inside. The smoke was a living thing in there. It pressed against him, thick and hot, with a weight he hadn't expected. His eyes burned immediately. He dropped low the way he'd seen in a safety video years ago, and he moved through the entrance hallway, past toppled floral arrangements and a sign that read, "Congratulations, Olivia and Daniel," in gold cursive letters. The irony of those words would only hit him later. At that moment, all he could follow was the sound. A woman crying, not screaming anymore, just crying. The kind of sound that means a person has moved past panic into something quieter and more frightening. The sound of someone who has stopped expecting rescue. He found her in the back room, collapsed near a window that wouldn't open, still in her wedding dress. The gown was ivory and full and completely surreal against the black smoke and orange light, and she was holding the skirt of it up around her knees, coughing into the fabric, tears cutting clean lines down a face streaked with ash. She couldn't have been older than 30. Her veil was torn. One of her shoes was missing, and when she looked up and saw Marcus crouching toward her, something moved across her face that broke him open completely. Not relief, not yet, but disbelief. The expression of someone who had genuinely stopped believing anyone was coming. Her name was Olivia Reyes, though he didn't know that yet. What he knew was that she was alive, she was terrified, and the ceiling above them had just let out a deep and terrible groan. Marcus didn't speak. There was no air to spare for words. He wrapped one arm around her waist, pulled her upright, and guided her toward the hallway with his jacket still pressed across both their faces as best he could manage. She was shaking so violently that her legs barely cooperated, and twice he nearly carried her full weight before her feet found the floor again. The hallway seemed longer going out. The smoke was denser. A part of the ceiling near the entrance had dropped, scattering debris across the floor, and Marcus had to kick a burning piece of wood out of the path before they could move through. He felt the heat on the back of his hand and ignored it. He felt Olivia grip his arm with both of hers, and he held on tighter. They came out of the front door together and collapsed onto the sidewalk, and the crowd that had been frozen suddenly surged forward, and someone was calling out to the paramedics who were just pulling up, and Marcus sat on the concrete with his back against the front steps of the burning hall, his eyes streaming, his lungs dragging in clean air in great heaving pulls, and Olivia Reyes sat next to him with her wedding dress pooled around her, and her face buried in her hands, shaking and breathing and alive. He didn't know yet what she had survived before that fire. He didn't know that this had been her wedding day only by formality, that Daniel, whose name was on that congratulations sign, had not shown up, that she had waited 45 minutes at the altar while guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and her mother made excuses and her maid of honor made phone calls, and that the text finally came through just as Olivia was stepping outside to get air. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm already gone." He didn't know that she had gone back inside not to gather her things, but because she didn't know where else to go, that she had sat in that back room with a bouquet of white roses in her lap and decided the world could simply burn around her for a little while because she had nothing left to protect. He didn't know that she had stopped trying to get the window open, not because she couldn't, but because somewhere in the smoke and the grief and the wreckage of the day, she had simply stopped trying. Marcus Webb had not just pulled a bride from a fire, he had pulled a woman back from the edge of her own surrender. The paramedics checked them both. Marcus had a second-degree burn across the back of his right hand and smoke inhalation that would leave him with a cough for 2 weeks. Olivia was treated for smoke exposure and mild shock. They sat across from each other on separate gurneys near the ambulance, wrapped in those thin silver emergency blankets that crinkle with every breath, and at some point, neither of them could say exactly when, they simply looked at each other. No words. Just two people who had both been broken down to something essential, something honest, something underneath the performance of everyday life. Lily was brought to the scene by a neighbor who had gotten Marcus's frantic voicemail, and the little girl ran across the parking lot in her play costume and threw herself into her father's arms with a force that nearly knocked him off the gurney. He held her tight with his unbandaged hand and pressed his face into her hair and breathed. And Olivia watched this man, this ordinary, exhausted, tender-hearted man, hold his daughter with everything he had left, and something in her chest cracked open in a way that had nothing to do with the smoke. In the weeks that followed, Marcus visited to check on her once. Just once, he told himself. Olivia opened the door of her apartment, still looking fragile, but standing straight. She had made coffee. They sat at her kitchen table and talked for 3 hours, and it was the kind of conversation that skips the shallow end entirely and goes straight to the deep water, about loss, about loneliness, about what it means to keep going when you've forgotten what you're going toward. He told her about his wife. She told him about the years she'd spent shrinking herself to fit someone who was always halfway out the door. He laughed for the first time in months. She cried, but differently this time, not from despair, but from the relief of being seen. They didn't fall in love quickly or dramatically. It happened the way real things happen, slowly, imperfectly, between school pickups and shared Sunday dinners, and the afternoon Lily grabbed Olivia's hand in a grocery store and announced, loudly enough for the entire cereal aisle to hear, that she had decided Olivia had nice eyes. It happened in the ordinary spaces of ordinary life, where the real miracles always live. Marcus Webb never thought of himself as anyone's hero. He was just a tired man in a paper crown who heard someone crying and couldn't drive past. But sometimes that is exactly what heroism looks like. Not grand or polished, just a person who decides in one small and terrifying moment to turn toward the fire instead of away from it. And Olivia Reyes, who had stopped trying to open a window, learned something that smoke-filled evening that she would carry for the rest of her life, that hope doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes running through the front door with burning hands and a jacket over its face, and it finds you exactly where you are, in the wreckage of the worst day of your life, and it says without a single word, "I've got you. Let's go." If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you that one person's courage can be another person's entire turning point, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your small action keeps these stories alive and helps this community grow. And before you go, we'd love to know, what part of this story moved you the most? Drop it in the comments below. Your words matter more than you know. And from all of us at Kindness, thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, And thank you for being the kind of person who still believes that goodness is worth celebrating.